Hello, Professor Moore and fellow classmates. My name is Michaela Miller, and my paper is on the first deaf school in America. So, my thesis is, in America, we have deaf schools today because of three men who all wanted to help a little girl. So, Alex Cogswell was a little deaf girl from Hartford, Connecticut. She contracted meningitis at the age of 2, and that's the reason for her hearing loss. Growing up, Alice didn't know any sign language. Nobody taught her anything, so her family made up different signs. We would call them home signs to be able to communicate with her on a very basic level. Pointing to things and different signs like that. But so she was mostly alone growing up. She kept to herself. She watched her siblings play. Until around the age of 9, a man named Thomas Gallaudet befriended Alice. He started to teach her signs by drawing words in the dirt and then showing the sign for that word, or pointing at things. It was very basic because he didn't know much, but he was trying to do what he could. Her dad noticed that Gallaudet had taken an interest in Alice, so he told Gallaudet that he would fund his trip to Paris to learn sign language, so he could come back and teach Alice and other deaf students. So Mason Cogswell was Alice's dad. He was a very wealthy surgeon in Connecticut, but he didn't know how to help Alice. He did a lot of research. He found many other children in the area that were deaf like Alice, and he wanted to help. He learned that in Europe, they were much more advanced in their knowledge of sign language and how to teach deaf children. So after noticing Gallaudet and Alice talking a lot, he told Gallaudet that he'd fund his trip. So he paid for Gallaudet to go to Paris and learn sign language. So this is where we'll go into Thomas Gallaudet. So Thomas Gallaudet was a Yale graduate. He wanted to become a pastor, but soon after he met Alice, he kind of put that dream to the side and decided to focus on her. So he, after taking Cogswell up on his offer to send him to Paris, he went to Paris and studied at the Institution Nationale des Sourds Muets. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a French name. So while studying there, Gallaudet met a man named Laurent Clerc, who became his teacher. After being there a while, Gallaudet decided he was going to come back to the States, and he asked Laurent Clerc if he would like to join him to help him start the school. So they came back to America and started the Connecticut Asylum for the Education and Instruction of Deaf and Dumb Persons. Later, the school is known as the American School for the Deaf. So Gallaudet had a passion for deaf people because he had a passion for Christ. He knew that if he never shared the gospel with them because he couldn't communicate with them, that they would never know Jesus as their Savior. So this is the driving force behind Gallaudet wanting to help the deaf children. So this goes into, now we're going into Laurent Clerc. As the story goes, Laurent Clerc fell into a fire at the age of 1, and that is how he lost his hearing. So growing up, he went to the Royal Institution for the Deaf. After he graduated, he was asked to stay on as a professor, and he worked there for a while and was eventually given the highest class at the school because of his hard work and dedication. So then Gallaudet came, and he was assigned to Gallaudet. He decided to come back with Gallaudet when he asked him, so they came back and they started the American School for the Deaf. After starting that, he was still in charge of training Gallaudet because Gallaudet wasn't fluent yet. He was in charge of teaching classes. Hearing men would come for conferences that Laurent Clair would be in charge of teaching them, and also because the government only allowed students to stay at the school for 5 years at a time, he had to pack in as much as he could into that short amount of time to make sure the children learned what he felt that they should be learning. Gallaudet, well, no, Clair actually taught his students French Sign Language, but after a while, the mix of home signs and French signs and just different stuff kind of all got put together into what we now know as American Sign Language. The Connecticut Asylum for the Education and Instruction of the Deaf and Dumb Persons was founded in 1817. This is a huge day for deaf people because this started everything they have today. The school is often known as the Mother School because students that graduated from there went off to start their own schools, and because of that, eventually Gallaudet's son actually started a college in Washington, D.C. called Gallaudet University. In 1817, a university for the deaf would have never been something that they would even think about because deaf people were thought of as incapable of learning because we just didn't know enough about how to teach them that nobody ever did. So this kind of started, the deaf school started the change in Americans' minds of deaf people, and they started to realize that they were capable of learning. It's just they needed specialized training. Those are a few of the biggest things that came from that school. Obviously, was the university, the way we think about deaf people today, the opportunities they have. They can now, get degrees, they can get jobs, they can start families, and be a normal functioning part of society. So, thank you.